Good morning to you. Thanks for being with us this morning. Our top story, a last-minute dash to Strasbourg has seen UK Prime Minister Theresa May secure what she says are legally binding changes to her Brexit deal, just hours before British MPs vote on it. Speaking alongside European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker, Prime Minister May claimed she had received assurances on the so-called backstop, which is designed to prevent a hard border on the island of Ireland. But as MPs in Britain gear up to vote for a second time on May's deal, opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn labelled it a failure and called on Parliament to reject it once again. Last night, Jean-Claude Juncker sent a stark warning to Westminster yesterday that this would be their last chance.
In politics, sometimes you get a second chance. It is what we do with the second chance that counts, because there will be no third chance. There will be no further interpretation of the interpretations and no further assurances on the reassurances if the winning vote fails tomorrow. Let us be crystal clear about the choice. It is this deal or Brexit might not happen at all.
Well, as ever, we've got correspondents in both Brussels and Westminster. In a moment, we'll be speaking to Tig Enright, who's in London. But first, Maeve McMahon in Brussels. Maeve, what changes have been made to that withdrawal agreement then?
Well, Belle, there's been absolutely no physical changes to that withdrawal agreement. That withdrawal agreement of almost 600 pages that was endorsed by EU heads of states here in Brussels back on the 13th of December. What we saw Jean-Claude Juncker, the European Commission President, offer Theresa May in the early hours last night in Strasbourg was legal clarifications that, in his words, complement that much discussed backstop. He said the backstop was just a legal or it was just an insurance policy that might never have to be used, and he said that what the documents he provided last night would make sure that both sides, if there was bad faith, could leave it unilaterally if they wanted, and he said it would mean the UK would not be trapped inside the backstop, something that many feared in the UK that they would be. Now, how will Theresa May sell this new paperwork and the new legal jargon to MPs? That is, of course, the question. Let's take a listen to the UK Prime Minister, who was sitting beside Jean-Claude Juncker last night in a packed press room in Strasbourg.
Having an insurance policy to guarantee that there will never be a hard border in Northern Ireland is absolutely right. It honours the UK's solemn commitments in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. But if we ever have to use that insurance policy, it cannot become a permanent arrangement, and it is not the template for our future relationship. The deal that MPs voted on in January was not strong enough in making that clear, and legally binding changes were needed to set that right. Today, we have agreed them.
And Theresa May mentioned the future relationship there, because that is, of course, key to her. And what Jean-Claude Juncker also said last night in that press conference was as soon as that withdrawal agreement is ratified by the House of Commons, talks will start on the EU-UK trade agreement, something that he's keen to start. He wants to see this withdrawal agreement wrapped up as soon as possible. He said last night, we owe it to history.
Well, of course, that's the big question. If it's ratified by the British Parliament, that's far from a done deal. What happens in Brussels if MPs reject that new updated withdrawal agreement?
Well, that's the question on everyone's lips this morning. Most people I speak to say they want to keep a glimmer of hope, a little bit of optimism, because they want to see progress. They say that a no Brexit would be a catastrophe. But if it is rejected, Jean-Claude Juncker was clear last night. He said there would be no third chance, there would be no tweaking of the text, there would be no more legal clarifications or reassurances. He said that is the deal on the table. He said, let's be crystal clear, otherwise there may not be a Brexit. So clearly Brussels putting the ball back in the court of the UK.
Maeve, thank you very much. Maeve McMahon there in Brussels. And as we promised, we're going to go straight over to Tig Enright in Westminster. Tig, last time we saw a previous iteration of this withdrawal agreement voted on in Parliament, it suffered a historic defeat. Has Theresa May done enough for that to change this time round?
Morning to you, Belle. I think that's by no means certain at this stage, and Theresa May is facing into quite a nervous day. But she's probably more confident than she was yesterday, when it looked as if she had nothing new from Brussels to offer to her sceptical MPs. Today, she has got something at least. But of course, as you mentioned, the defeat in January was in the scale of 230 MPs. So those are the numbers that she has to convince today. And they largely fall into three different camps. Number one, you've got the Labour opposition party. They've described the negotiations as a failure and will understandably be whipping their MPs to oppose it, as any opposition party would do. But she might be able to win over some of their MPs from pro-Brexit constituencies. Then there's the Northern Irish DUP party, on which Theresa May's government relies for its majority in Parliament. They understandably hate the backstop for very particular reasons. They've said they will be studying the latest editions very carefully. And then, of course, there's also the hardliners within her own party, the so-called European Research Group, who many people say are acting effectively like another party within a party, talking very undiplomatically. One of their leaders saying this is a very good gloss on something that falls short. But I think they too will be studying the detail very finely, with those words from Jean-Claude Juncker echoing in their ears, that they now face a choice between this withdrawal agreement and the latest additions to it, or perhaps no Brexit at all.
And Ty, just talk us through how today is going to unfold.
Well, Belle, the first hurdle is the legal advice from the Attorney General. Geoffrey Cox is going to be giving that this morning. Cast your mind back to January, the government had to be forced to publish his legal advice in full, in which he said there was a danger that the backstop could, as he put it, endure indefinitely. So what will he say this time around? Will his position on that be changed? Then Theresa May will stand up here in Parliament and start a debate and start 3 days of debate and decisive voting on this. If she gets her deal through tonight, well, that's it. She's done and dusted. The chapter is closed and we move forward to the next stage in these negotiations. But of course, if it fails, and then there are two further votes, one on ruling out no deal, another on potentially extending the March 29th deadline, and I think a whole new set of questions for whether Theresa May is the right leader to lead that chapter.